Mr. President, dear Jerzy, thank you very much for this very too kind introduction. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is such a scary thought that I am the only obstacle between you and the main course of this dinner. I will probably get more applause if I leave the stage immediately, but still, I will try and share a few thoughts with you. Tonight I want to start by very briefly paying tribute to a son of Poland who sadly died yesterday and who was a very good friend, a great humanitarian, and a laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize, Szymon Peres. I have many stories to tell about him and my few encounters I had with him over the decades. But one I want to share with you tonight. I once witnessed him talking to one of his friends who also had Polish roots. And they were talking about their childhood in Poland and making a lot of fun about it and laughing. And I asked his friend, "So you're Polish?" which was an opening question, but also a silly question because it was evident. And he answered in this way. He said, "Yes, my friend, I am Polish. What you see here is 100% chopped liver." And he said, you know the story in the Bible of Canaan and the multiplication of the change of water into wine. He said, my Polish mother, she was capable of a much bigger miracle. She could take any part of an animal and turn it into chopped liver. We salute you, great man, Szymon Peres. Ladies and gentlemen, how can one not be filled with optimism standing here in Sopot, on historic ground, in the presence of men and women who had the audacity to challenge a system when this system seemed eternal and unmovable? I salute you, Marshal of the Senate, for your courage in 1980 to take up the gauntlet and to say to an unjust and dictatorial system, no more. We will take no more. How much courage was necessary to do that? Sometimes I wonder if people here in Sopot and Gdańsk understand to what extent Lech Wałęsa has inspired generations of Europeans. I was a young student in 1980. And I sat before the television set looking at what was happening in Gdańsk. And we cried when we saw the crackdown in 1981 of the regime. And we all thought, frankly, the division of Europe is forever. The Poles, as always, are very, very courageous. But the world is as it is. Lech Wałęsa and his comrades were right and we were wrong. It takes determination, it takes dreams, it takes justice. Then even the strongest, more oppressive system can be overturned if it is unjust, if it is outdated, if it stands with its back to the future. That was the communist system that you defeated. I was a student at the time. In 1989, my oldest son was born. If I talk to him about that time in Europe, I took him on a tour of the Baltic state last year. Everything that seemed still a miracle to me, the euro there, and no borders, people talking, dressing, looking like my children. I see this still as a miracle. My son says, okay, that's it, that's how Europe is, that's how I am a European. Is that not a huge cause for optimism and hope? That my son, who was born in 1989, sees this as the new normal, which for us, I was trained as a soldier to fight the Warsaw Pact. The only good thing that came out of it is that I learned Russian, which is very useful. But that was our world, and look at the world today. So even though today we have many, many worries, many concerns, let's look at Sopot and Gdansk. Let's revive the memory of the early 1980s. And let's then say to each other, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Now let me turn to our challenges. Yes, Europe is challenged. And yes, these challenges have many, many faces. Terrorism, globalization, migration, economic crisis, unemployment, banking crisis. This whole combination of things that bring insecurity, which are embedded and encircled by the fourth industrial revolution, which will undoubtedly move things. The core issue for Europe today, I would say the core issue for the world today is how do we handle the fourth industrial revolution? How do we make sure that we are capable of taking it, molding it, changing it into something that serves the interests of all our citizens? How do we do that? My friends, that is the main question we need to answer now, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. And make no mistake, there is a new ideological battle in this world. Don't be distracted by discussions about a clash of civilizations or a clash between religions. The real fight in the world is between openness and closeness. The real fight in the world is between those who believe in a world of compromise, of interchange, of openness, of contact, of dialogue, and those who believe in a world of a closed shop, of fences and borders, of a perceived national purity. Yes, the European Union needs to do a better job at protecting its international borders, its external borders. Yes, the Commission has made proposals to do that, and I salute the members of the European Parliament here present who did an incredible job in making these decisions possible within 6 months. Now we need to put them into practice. We will start early October. The headquarters will be in Warsaw. European Border Guard, European Coast Guard will be put into place. It is highly necessary. What we don't need is borders inside Europe. And I'm talking about physical borders, economic borders, and also mental borders, I would call them. I strongly believe that those who believe they can corner off their own country from the rest of the European Union by building borders will perhaps have a couple of months or years respite. But then, creating borders inside Europe will have a profound effect on the whole of the European construction. Creating borders in Europe will be the end of Schengen. The end of Schengen will have profound consequences for the workings of the internal market, negative consequences. So be careful what you do. Preserving Schengen is not just about making it easier for people to travel across borders. Preserving Schengen is an essential part of preserving the internal market, of making the internal market work better, of preparing our societies for the challenges of globalization. These things are intimately linked. That is why I believe we need to move forward to rid ourselves of the illusion that national borders will offer solutions. They will not. We need European solidarity. My second point is about where do we take our economy and our labor market. Do we say, let's try and keep people comfortable where they are, which is sometimes the predominant feeling in politics in many nations. And it is understandable. This is the first time since the Second World War in many of our nations that parents fear that their children will be worse off than they are today. Let's take my own country as an example, the Netherlands. It is true, doing extremely well. We have just surpassed Germany on the World Economic Forum ranking in terms of performance of our economy. And let me tell you this, we share one thing with the Poles. We love nothing better than to beat the Germans at something. I salute Elmar Brok, who's just arrived. As usual, Elmar Brok arrives late. But to compensate for that, he mostly leaves early as well. So the country is doing economically very well. If you talk to individual people in my country individually and you ask them, are you happy? 9 out of 10, they will say, yes, I'm happy and I'm doing well. And then they will add, but we are not doing well. And they mean society. This is something we need to think about. Why are so many people in Europe individually quite happy, but collectively have this feeling of unease? I'm not sure if this applies in Poland as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. If I ask you, has there ever been a time in Polish history when this country was freer, when the borders of this country were completely uncontested like they are today, when this country is part of a European family as full-fledged and strong member, when East is no longer a pejorative qualification, which it was during the Cold War, when Poland is no longer in the East or in the West, but in the middle of Europe, has there ever been a time like that? What would be your answer? Probably no. Let's not forget what has been achieved by you. Poland has no one to say thank you to, but to its own citizens. Let's be very clear about this. But Poland is also part of a wider European family that can only grasp the opportunities globalization has to offer if we do it together. We need to take our economy to a sustainable economy. We need to make sure that our young people have the skills to operate in the economy of tomorrow. We need to make sure that all this creativity that is just waiting to be explored in Europe is put to good task for our economy. And we can only do this if we are open for exchanges, if talents can travel freely across Europe, if people can come here if they see a company they like, if they see a company that needs their talent, and if Polish people can go all over Europe to share their talents, as they have done in the last decades. And speaking out clearly against aggression against Poles in the United Kingdom, as they have suffered since the Brexit debate, is not just about justice. It's not just about the right thing to do because people should not be attacked. It is because with every Pole or other national being attacked for being from another country, we destroy the idea of Europe. And we cannot allow that to happen. There is this false contradiction between the nations of Europe and the European Union. I think the real contradiction is between patriots and nationalists. Patriots are people who love their country because they are proud of what it is, of what it can do, of what it has done. They are proud of what it is able to do, and they want to show that pride to the rest of the world in an open way. Come and see us. Look what we can do. Come and join us. Help us. Talk to us. Nationalism, sooner or later, will go looking for enemies. Internal enemies, external enemies. And let's not be confused. Let's not be confused. There is nothing wrong. I would say it is beautiful to be a patriot. But let's that not degenerate into being a nationalist. I strongly believe this with my experience, having lived and traveled all across Europe. I also strongly believe this, and I want to share this with you right now because of the historic experience of my own family. My father is getting on, getting old, and as happens with people who are getting on, the past becomes more and more important. And when I talk to him, more often than not, he starts talking about his childhood years in Breda, in the Netherlands, under German occupation. When he was suffering as a young boy, malnutrition, he was very skinny, and his parents were very worried. And then they were liberated by General Maciek's soldiers, Polish soldiers. Their street, they saw them, the helmets with the eagle. And my grandparents took Polish soldiers into their house. And one of them was a tailor. And most of them spoke a bit of German because that was the only language they shared, ironically enough, in those days. And they, out of an old uniform, they made a tailored uniform, Polish uniform, for my father. And he was used as a mascot in the morning when they did their exercises. And now that he's old, these are the memories that are coming back. Can you imagine that I'm standing between two generations? My father, who has very vivid memories of fighting in his street and Polish soldiers dying for our freedom, and my son, who can't even imagine what it was like in the Cold War, and I'm there in between, and I share living memories with both of them. Isn't this a miracle, ladies and gentlemen? Should we not be proud of that miracle as Europeans? And yes, of course, what we did in the past is not a guarantee for the future. But the past should be the place where we find the force to do what is necessary for the future. The past should not be a place that we idealize, that we create a mythical place and we promise people to take them back to a past that never was, because that will lead to a future that will never be. We need to take people into the future. And it is my strong belief that this future will be diverse, this future will be international, this future can be built because we have the smartest, healthiest, most open generation in our history, in our young men and women who will shape this future with us and especially themselves for themselves. You know, I have to mention this subject. You would be surprised if I didn't. The rule of law. Why do I believe the rule of law is so essential in that? Our countries are diverse and will become more diverse. And with diverse, I don't just mean ethnically diverse, culturally diverse. I also mean politically diverse, diverse in the choices you make in your life. And diverse societies, when they are democracies, what they need in a democracy is at least as much respect for the wishes of the minorities as for the wishes of the majorities. That is the essence of democracy. If you translate democracy into, if I have the majority, I dictate what will happen, then you turn democracy into a tyranny. In that context, respect of institutions for each other's respective role becomes essential. The independence of the judiciary is an essential element in the construction of our modern societies and will become more important, not less important, in the future. Defending the independence of the judiciary is a patriotic duty of every citizen of the European Union, and the European Commission will stand at the sides of those who do that. And let me stress very clearly, this is not interference in internal affairs of a country. This is not talking down to a nation or a country. I would not dare. I might not have lived if Polish soldiers did not liberate my father in 1944. So I only have deepest respect for Poland and its courage. But I do maintain that it is our duty to maintain the institutions that hold together the values of the European Union, but also the construction of the European Union. Because it is beyond values. Values should be enough, but it's beyond that. It's also very practical. The independence of the judiciary is essential for the internal market. Here again, you might not see it at face value, but it is true. An investor needs to be sure that if there is a conflict, he can go or she can go to a court, and that court will judge independently of political influence on the basis of the merit of the law. That is essential. The European Union is based on a few, very few principles that I want to, and I'll end there before you all starve, that I want to reiterate tonight. The first principle is, we know as nations we might have diverging interests, but we all know that it is in our common interest to seek compromise on all these diverging interests. Let's stop at national level to play this zero-sum game. I need to win, he needs to lose. That's the only way forward. Let's reinvent the beauty of a compromise as something that makes everyone advance in this world where Europe needs to be united to face globalization. That's the first principle. The second principle is this. Europe has small and Europe has big nations. The only way you can prevent small nations to be crushed by big nations is to make sure that small and big nations all observe the rule of law. Treaties apply to everyone regardless of their size or importance. If we abandon that principle, the European Union will not survive. We need to maintain that principle, and it will have to be applied to all states. But finally, let me return to my main point. If nationalism, which to some people seems an answer today because they are worried about their futures, so they want to return to something that they think did the job in the past. But if it prevails, the nations of Europe, they will probably survive. The European Union, my friends, will certainly not. And you can say that might not be a bad thing. I think it would be a bad thing. Sooner or later in the history of mankind and of Europe, we will come up with a better solution for working together than the European Union. But for the time being, I do maintain this is just as good as it gets in terms of how we can cooperate for the common good of all our peoples. And I count on Poland to not stand with its back to the future, to certainly not stand with its back to the European Union. But I count on Poland to take its European destiny in hand, to show to all those other Europeans what can be done if you have the audacity to dream about freedom and to take us in a future that will be prosperous for all of us. Thank you very much.